Hello, hello, and welcome to Minority Reportz. I'm your host, Mona Shaikh. I have this guest today that I have been worshiping ever since, even before I ever did stand-up comedy, and it is almost surreal to be so honored to have her as my guest today. She was just named by Rolling Stone one of the top 50 stand-up comedians of all times. This guest needs no introduction. Margaret Cho, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. It's so
I,
great.
I just want you to know that I go to the Church of Cho.
Oh my gosh.
I just totally go to the Church of Cho, and
Oh,
you're just so lovely and amazing. And
well, thank you.
sorry, I'm being totally geeking out over you, but
Awesome.
you're so fantastic. Now we were before we started this episode. You were talking about you were just at Sketchfest.
Yeah, I go, it's usually in January. And then, so when I go, I usually sing and play with the band that I'm in, the Red Room Orchestra, which is a very large musician group. It's like we do soundtracks of movies. So we did
Amazing.
Boogie Nights and some songs from Wild at Heart and Twin Peaks and Blue Velvet, the David Lynch movies. So it's a big project, but it's a lot of fun. And so then I did that, and then I did a live podcast too.
Wow. So now you've been singing for a while. Like I've heard you singing. I think
Hmm.
one of your most famous songs I heard was about was it Fat Pussy? I think that was one of the ones
Yeah.
which I just love. And
Thank
it
you.
also made me want to go. I actually went home and checked mine if I had a fat pussy. Turns out I don't. I don't have a fat pussy.
It
And
depends. It's always, it's one of those things that I guess it's also kind of a matter of perspective. It's not necessarily that it's fat or that it's fatter than the rest of your body. It's more like, is it something that I always thought like there's something wrong with my anatomy because it's very large, but it just means that I'm hung.
that's the female version of being hung.
Yeah, I think so.
Got it. The fat. I just thought it was like extra padding. You know.
Yeah, I mean, it's like definitely the vagina is resilient. Like it's like a
So
very
resilient.
important and very pretty like resilient and strong part of our bodies. It's
Yeah.
something that's meant to take a lot. If you think about childbirth, it's like definitely goes through a lot.
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
think, those parts of our bodies can be very tough, which you wouldn't necessarily think about it as that because people always think like penises are very vulnerable,
Yeah.
because the worst thing that can happen is if they get like hit there. But,
Right.
women have to do so much more with our bodies. I mean, it's odd that there's no kind of double standard in terms of like what we can take because we can take a lot there.
Right. I mean, the pounding that goes on before you actually even have childbirth. I mean,
Oh yeah,
that's
of
a lot.
course, yeah,
It's a
for
lot. It's like
sure.
somebody just like punching you in the vagina.
Yeah. So it's good to have padding there.
I'm so glad we are starting off on such a
I think so.
fantastic. I love
Yeah,
it.
it's good.
I love all of this. I know that you and I have talked many a times before about just our cultural upbringings and both of us being Asian and of South Asian descent and being minorities and female stand up comics. I mean, I wanted to kind of talk to you a little bit about your upbringing and your background, and was there trauma involved in that?
Well, I think there always is. I mean, well, for us, I think like for our family, my family came to America in the 1960s, and they endured a lot of trauma just kind of like coming into this culture, moving to San Francisco from Korea in 1964 and enduring all of the racism that they did in 1960 San Francisco. That time was not, San Francisco was not the progressive sort of mecca that we think of today, or maybe not even today, but it would be like in the 80s and 90s and 70s, 80s and 90s, 60s, 70s, 90s. So that sort of like cultural shift didn't necessarily happen there until the late 60s, which was a different thing. But so they endured a lot, and they didn't really share any of that with us. And so that comes from like being from a country that just doesn't share the hardships with the other generations. We sort of take it on ourselves and kind of absorb all of it. So, you didn't really hear a lot about what they went through until much later. And then, there was lots of different things that I endured too, like kind of being Korean American, being the first generation of Korean Americans in our kind of city in our time. And so there was a lot of different things. But, I think like now, like I look back, probably the most harmful thing was something that I didn't even understand then, which was invisibility, because we never saw ourselves in any capacity in the media. So there was this sort of feeling like we wouldn't necessarily exist unless we were doing something on a level that can be seen. Like when you're invisible like that, though, you don't feel like you're being observed or seen. And so there's a sense of feeling invisible and feeling very powerless over that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for you, like your first generation, I'm an immigrant. I moved when I was 15. So there was this whole thing about coming here and then like you have to still be Pakistani and you have to hold on to culture. And for me, it's also the religion aspect. Oh, you're Muslim, so you have to be a good Muslim girl. You can't do this, you can't do that. My family was trying to marry me off when I was 17 years old to a 40-year-old doctor in Boston, who was a Pakistani guy, and my mom sat me down one day and was just like making me kind of swear on the Quran, and I was like, "What's up? Why am I swearing on the Quran today after high school?" And she was like, "Well, she's like, you have to promise me that you are going to, do something I'm asking you." And I'm like, "Which is?" She's like, "I want you to marry this guy. He's going to pay for your college." So I'm like, "So you want me to whore myself out to, you just want me to put out so I can get my college tuition paid? Like, how the fuck does that work?" I mean, what did you have, like, your first generation? So you must have had a lot of cultural pressure, I would think, from your family to hold on to culture, hold on to language, hold on, and, just like, maintain that, kind of carry that baton on. Did you not grow up with that pressure?
Yeah, for sure. But there was a kind of an odd thing because my generation, we were really, they counted on us to be really Americanized. And part of that was not having an accent of any kind. And so we would.
Your parents
They
not
would
wanting
speak.
you to have an accent. Is that what you're talking
No,
about?
so they didn't want us to have an accent at all. So that but they would speak to us in Korean, and we'd have to answer in English. And so there was this thing of like we have to be Americanized. So
Yeah.
and then the weirdness of like the marriage thing and like the status sort of that goes along with that, like so much of my journey was so outside of anything that my parents could claim as a status thing. Like I didn't go to a good school, I didn't have good grades, I didn't have any of these sort of precursors to like getting a good husband, so that I was considered really hopeless from the beginning.
Yeah.
Also, I think because I had expressed my queerness very young. It's, I first came out like as gay, like as a lesbian, like when I was probably about 18. And so
Right.
that kind of threw my parents in another direction of like, well, there's no way then, what are we going to do? And then later when I was like, I'm bisexual, then it was just really confusing. Then they were really like, we don't know what to do. So I wasn't pressured to marry, although when I did finally get married, they acted like that was the best thing that's ever happened to me. Like I've achieved a lot of things in my life, but
Yeah.
the most proud my family has ever been is when I was married. And that was not an achievement for anybody to be proud of. It didn't make sense to me that that was what they put so much value on, as they didn't put value on any real other accomplishment, which were pretty big
Yeah.
comparatively. But so I really did feel it later when I did sort of conform. Whenever I conformed, then it was really special. Then my parents would be really excited. But I spent so much of my time not conforming that I was mostly frustrating kind of a person to deal with and put into any context that they understood.
Right. Because, I mean, from Asian culture, South Asian culture, so similar in the sense that for a woman, especially, your validation is in the fact that you get married. Your validation is in you having children. And any other huge achievements like such as yours, which is, being named Rolling Stone's top 50 stand-up comics of all time. To them, it's just like, oh, that's nice. But do you have kids? Do you have a husband?
Yeah, that's much more important, and that's much more something to be celebrated, which to me is an odd thing that they don't really acknowledge anything that I've done professionally. I think, but that's just the culture. We don't know what to do with the women's accomplishments.
That's right. We don't know what to do with it. But
yeah.
the man getting married is not nearly as much of a pressure on a guy getting married as it is on females like you and I.
No, but at the same time, it's something that they will start to stress out about after a certain age.
Sure.
There's and that's kind of newer. That's kind of a different thing. But it's certainly not as much of a status thing as your daughter marrying somebody important. That's kind of like the best that a woman can do in a family is marry somebody that raises the status of the entire family, which to me is like so crazy.
Cher a long time ago was being interviewed, and she was being asked by an interviewer. She was talking about her mom. Her mom was like, honey, you need to just settle down and marry a rich man. And Cher said, I am a rich man.
Yeah.
And
that's true.
It's so true.
It's so true. And it's like, that's what I always think, like, why do I have to be married up to somebody when I can create that status within myself?
That's right.
And so I don't know. I mean, my plan for my life now, I'm single, and I really hope that I can remain single for the rest of my life, since so much of my life has been kind of internalizing that need for being partnered. And I do think that it's really deteriorated my individuality to some degree. So I'm really hoping that I can spend the rest of my time on Earth single. That's my hope, but we'll see.
That is that. Now you got me thinking about me remaining single. I got married young. I had severe daddy issues growing up. I think I've touched upon growing up in a very abusive family with my dad beating the crap out of me at a very young age. My 4 older brothers would take turns beating the crap out of me, and I would have to call the cops on them. So it was I've never really had a good male role model in my life, so I don't really know what a good man looks like. And it's been like 14 years of therapy and trying to figure out what a good man looks like. And, every time I go out and, and I've been single for a while. I was married at 18. I met a man who was 65 years old. And by the time he was 69, I was 22. So a lot of people are like, wow, Mona, you had daddy issues. And I said, no, I have granddaddy issues. And for me, it's just like now I look at my life, and as I get older, and I'm just like, do I really need to settle down? Like, I think it's so much of it is cultural conditioning, don't you think?
Yeah, and it's kind of like an old world behavior, but it's also really and reinforced by American culture too, because there's this idea in like love and romance here is that we're somehow not complete unless we're partnered, which I don't think is the right way to go about life. I mean, I don't know. Like every time I've been in a serious relationship, it's really just been a disaster. And I think I do far better on my own, but I am vulnerable to both my conditioning growing up as my family intended me to be, and I'm emotionally stunted by rom-coms. And, the kind of entertainment that I enjoy, oddly, there's always romance in it. I don't know why I sort of veer towards that kind of entertainment, but it may be because it's marketed to women. I don't really know.
Yeah.
But it's something that I realize, I'm just really been duped by all of this stuff I'm consuming. I blame Nora Ephron, who's somebody that I was lucky enough to know and admire, and also read voraciously and consume all of her work in many different capacities. And I think she really shaped me to believe that a man will solve everything. And it's not the case. And man or woman, it's not going to solve it.
That's right. 100%. I mean, so this whole thing about like being single, do you feel like you said, like you feel like you do better on your own than you do being in a relationship? And, recently I was kind of coming to terms with that to myself, where I'm just like, when I'm alone or when I'm just around friends or just by myself, I have a really good time. I'm like super happy. And it's like whenever I go on a date, I went on a horrible date this past weekend, and I'm just like, why do I put myself through that? Maybe I'm just not, this whole bullshit that they've sold women on about the whole soulmate thing and then the knight in shining armor. It's like, you are your own fucking knight in shining armor. There is nobody coming to save you. Fucking save yourself.
Exactly. And the thing is that dating isn't out of the question. I really enjoy dating, and I am dating quite a number of people now. And I really love that, because it's like I have these opportunities to share my life with special people who understand that, who are on their own journey.
Yeah.
So it's not about not dating. I mean, that's a constant. I always have dates, and I really like that, because it's like, it's not about a sexless existence. It's about a variant, like, of you're sexual, but you don't have to be a unit with somebody. You can actually be your own counsel and your own partner. And the sex comes in and leaves in a way that's like very manageable, because it's you're not being kind of consumed by the other person. Also, you're not like, the sex isn't a condition of the relationship. The sex is sort of put in a very special category. Like, I'm doing this as an elective activity that I really love, you know, and that we can come at this and do this and then separate. And that's the best. I hate sleeping in a bed with other people. It's the worst. I snore, they snore. I'm a light sleeper. I can't handle it. And so I think having separate homes, separate lives, but a sex life that is fulfilling and very intentional, as opposed to a requirement to keep this marriage alive, is really, it's really appealing to me.
Yeah, no, I 100%. And that's so funny you said that, because when I wake up in the morning by myself, I was like, this is nice. Like, I don't have to worry about somebody like farting next to me or snoring or none of that. Like, it's just me. And,
and that's great.
Yeah, I do. I feel like the longer I stay single is the more I enjoy it. And it is a scary thing for me.
It's an art form to really see life as, and create it the way that you want it, as opposed to what society has sanctioned for us, and also what we try to create, because we're kind of trying to recreate our favorite novels and TV shows and movies in our head. It's not that. That's not going to be the way that I want to live my life. The way that I curate my life is my life's work.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, I recently got some amazing quotes from you for the Forbes article that just came out recently, and it was your contribution was so fantastic, and thank you for doing that.
Of course.
I did want to touch upon like this whole, everything. The Women's March just happened this past weekend, and this whole thing about Time's Up and the Me Too movement, and you and I were talking about sexual harassment and gender bias experienced by female stand-up comics in the stand-up comedy world, which is still pretty prevalent. It's still very prevalent. And I was telling you about my experience recently in San Francisco. I was at a film festival, and this South Asian male comedian walked up to me and was, and called me a whore to my face and then walked away, which is fucking super crazy to me. No one has ever.
So crazy.
Honestly,
that's so crazy.
My thing with that is that, I know that we're going after white guys a lot, straight white men. We're really going after them. But there's also a group of, minority men who are hiding behind race, doing awful things, getting away with misogyny, getting away with sexual harassment, getting away with predatory behavior. And I feel like race is not going to be their savior. You know what I'm saying? Like those
Mm-hmm.
people need to be called out. I mean, what are your kind of thoughts about, female comics who experience this? They fear that if they come out, their career is going to be stunted. They're going to be, blocked out, basically blocked out of getting booked in rooms, or there's going to be rumors and they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to be controversial. Like, what are your kind of feelings and thoughts about that?
I mean, I think those fears are like they exist because the culture supports it. Comedy in its worst form can be a very intimidating boys club with a lot of gatekeeping, with a lot of exclusionary tactics that can really be very frightening if you're like trying to come up against it. But the fact is that it's changing, and comedy is now such a very large industry, and that it's very diverse, and these guys are not able to get away with what they used to be able to for years and years. And so it's really, I think it's getting better. I think the more that we stand up for ourselves, the better it will be for us and for future generations. I mean,
Yeah.
ultimately, there's still not enough women in comedy that we are very subtly allowing that to happen. That we don't. There's not enough women, and that's because the women are not supportive by the way that the men are. The men are supported by their community, and they're they nurture each other, and they really father each other in this industry. Whereas the women, there's so few of us, and we're so far apart, and so that there's not that sort of receiving of like, kind of good counsel from other women comics. There's not this sense of like community because there's just not enough of us. So there needs to be more.
Yeah. Do you feel like there's not, I feel like, I book so many comics, that I produce shows and stuff, and I book so many female comics. I come across so many more female comics. Do you feel like they're not enough female comics in more prominent shows and more prominent places? Is that what you mean? Like female stand-up comics?
And also compared to the numbers of men
right.
in comedy.
Sure.
So that's we just have to increase our numbers and increase the more of us in places of power to book other female comics, to support other female comics. It's just a different thing. Like, it's just a very weird thing. Cause like the men, like I watch the men and how they really, are there for each other in comedy, how they're there for comfort and for, counsel and for so many things. And we just don't have the numbers to support that.
Yep, I 100% agree. I mean, what do you think about like when female comics get all scared and they're like, you know what, I want to talk about this comedian who like was very predatory with me, but I don't want to expose their name. Like, what do you think about? Do you think these people's names should be exposed without kind of, you just kind of go through your fear anyways, and you just put their names out there because you're enabling them, aren't you? Like, don't you feel like you're enabling them when you hide their name and you protect their identities?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's really, but it's something that it's like, we're always afraid to come out against what is sort of the established patriarchy, because the silence has been kept by women in comedy for generations, so they were the first ones to actually break that. Right. And that's really hard. It's always very, very tough to venture out and sort of see what's going to happen. But, we saw great results, which is like now become Time's Up and Me Too and all of that, and it can't be a phase. Like, it can't be just this era that is done. It's got to be a permanent shift. And I think it is a permanent shift.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I feel like there are still so many female comics who tell me, I have a really dear friend who told me this weekend, I mean, I could not believe it, that a very prominent person at the Comedy Store was, decided to take them on tour with them. And there was another junior comic that was there. And while they were in, I forget what state they were in, the more accomplished comedian said to the female comic, hey, you're going to have sex with this junior comic, right? And she was like, wait, what? She was like, "You're gonna have sex with him," and she was like, "Oh yeah." She passed it out as laughing, like, "Ha yeah, okay." And then later on, it was a late night. It was ice outside. It was snowing. So this junior comic offered to walk her to her room, and they've been friends, by the way, for a long time, and they've never had any awkward relationship like this. So he's like, "Hey, can I come to your room, hang out for a bit?" And she was like, "Yeah, come on in." And the moment he steps in, he's like, "So we're gonna have sex, right?" And she's like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" And he's like, "Well, I guess if we're not gonna have sex, can I just come on top of you? Can I just jerk off in front of you and come on top of you?" And she was like, "Yeah, exactly." Fucking asking her. And she's like, "No, you can't fucking come on top of me." And he stood there and masturbated and like came on part of her clothes. Yeah. And so here's this situation where this person is just like, I can't go and talk about this person because this is, they might block me out. They might talk to their other dude, comedian friends and then block. Like, how do you talk about an asshole like that? Like, this man is a piece of shit.
I mean, that's disgusting.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like
keep your jizz to yourself, man. I don't want to fucking see your jizz.
So awful.
You want to nuts? Yeah, it's gross.
Yeah, it's disgusting. I mean, I think it's just like, I don't know. It's so horrible, but I can see like why people would be afraid. It's just a very scary proposition. Like, it's a horrible thing. And yeah, it's so what a nightmare. Awful.
How gross. I mean, I just feel like there are so many more stories like that. And so many female comics are just like so scared to come out and talk about it. They're like, well, if I just keep quiet and if I just put up with it, then, it'll just go away and I can just go about my life. And it's like, that is straight up like sexual assault to me.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's like also it's coercive control. It's a kind of assault that works on a lot of different levels. It's not just physical, it's very mental. And then it kind of goes into like the way that you're looking at comedy. And you might think like all comedies like that or all comedians are like that. They're not. This is like a really horrible situation. But it's definitely a lot of different forms of abuse happening at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to nut somewhere, just nut in your room, man. I don't want to.
It's so gross.
It's so disgusting. It's like, man, come on, Take your baby batter elsewhere. I don't need to see this. I don't know. I just I wanted to ask you about what we earlier kind of touched upon trauma a little bit. What do you feel there's any like kind of this particular point? There was any particular point in your life and in your childhood where it was kind of this turning point for you, where you were just like, you know what? Fuck this whole traditional thing about me going to school and getting good grades and all that. And I just want to, just live my life the way I want to. Do you feel like there was like this kind of turning point in your life somewhere in your childhood?
I don't know if there was so much of a turning point. It was just that I was just very deeply dissatisfied with my choices. Like, kind of laid out as I, kind of grew into like being like a preteen even. The thought of like, growing up to be somebody like my mom was unappealing or like my aunts was unappealing. Mm-hmm. Didn't want to go to school like forever and ever and ever. The lives that I saw the women in my family leading were just deeply dissatisfying to me. Like it was just nothing about that seemed like it would be good, because so much of their lives were lived through their husbands. So much of their lives were lived through higher education, where that was all that was there to do. And I think the meaning behind that was so that you could be in proximity to high status men that you could somehow marry. None of that was the right thing. Like I just didn't want to be any of those things. And I was doing like theater classes in school, and I was really into that. And there was a big comedy scene in San Francisco. So I was able to watch it on like the local TV. And I just knew that was what I wanted to do.
And what age was that approximately for you?
I made the real decision probably around 8 or 9 to be a comedian, but I didn't start till I was about 14.
Wow, 14. So you're sneaking into clubs?
Yeah. And then also my teacher at school was signing me up for open mics at this comedy club called the Other Cafe, which was actually a very famous club in San Francisco that had people like Paula Poundstone performing there every weekend. So I was doing open mics there. And then that gave me the ability underage to go see Paula Poundstone several times over quite a few years, throughout my teen years. And I was really influenced by her, but mostly her kind of like rejection of the gender norm, and kind of like also even a rejection of sexuality in any form, or gender really in any form. I really think that she was probably one of those sort of original people who were non-binary.
Yeah. Yeah.
And actually like living it, even though, she's never said that, but it's kind of like her example led me to believe that you could have an ungendered or non-binary existence when it came to career. And that was really important. It was really important modeling for me to see somebody doing that. And, from there, I ended up going on the road with people like Brett Butler, and then doing TV early on with Rosie O'Donnell. And so I was really helped forward by a lot of women in comedy.
Yeah. I mean, besides Paul Poundstone, like who else were your kind of heroes, in the comedy world growing up?
I think Joan Rivers, only like Joan Rivers for a while when I was really young, because she was the first person that I saw on TV.
Yeah. Female, especially. Huge.
Yeah. And a woman, and who you could tell that she was wealthy, powerful, and singular, that she was not defined by her marriage, even though, she was married and she had a child. There was none of that really sort of encumbered her presence on the stage, that she wasn't a woman first, she wasn't a mother first, she wasn't a wife first, she was a comedian first.
Right.
That was the really early modeling. That was really important.
And you worked with Joan. I mean, you had a really good relationship with Joan.
Yeah, she was really great and really encouraging. Probably much more of a softer, kinder presence than she would appear from her comedy. Because in her comedy, she's quite sharp and acerbic and can be very mean. But she was never like that in her life. She was a real maternal figure in a very, very gentle and soft way, and in a very like concern, sort of like feminine concern, maternal concern, which, so the more that you got to know her, the more you would be privy to that side of her, which was really, really beautiful.
Do you feel like she was just this way just with you, or she was like that with other female comics too?
No, she was like that with other female comics. I mean, there was very much a sense of this kind of like mother hen thing that she would do with people like me or Sarah Silverman, certainly. Quite a lot of women in comedy. She just really had a fondness for us. And I think like she understood like her contribution was really about mentoring, modeling, all this stuff. So I do think that she really relished that role, being kind of a role model, and enjoyed that. I think that's great.
So when you said maternal, she would be like, you can punch up this joke, or that kind of thing. Or
no, it was more like, like if I had a bad show, that's like the first person I would talk to. Is I would talk to her and ask her about things, and she was like, oh fuck them, like she was just like all like real like defensive about like, it was never your fault, it was always the audience's fault, and then just so angry about it. And, she would sort of fight these battles for you. Like after the show, she would fight these, like go to war with all of those audience members in her head. And it's sort of like, it was more not really advice per se, although there was some of that, especially like in relationships. And like, I think she was very much of the mind that you're not going to, it's not going to be the man that makes you. It's going to be you that make you, that kind of attitude, which I think is really important. So, I mean, there was a lot that she was giving you that was maternal, that was not, I guess, as obvious or as like much about like, she wouldn't get involved in like the way that you did your comedy or your work. It was more just, she just wanted to bolster your ego and boost you up.
I love that. I mean,
yeah.
Honestly, Margaret, like besides you, I don't really have like a like a female role, like a person that I can kind of look up to or talk to. And I think you and I have touched upon certain things, and I've asked your advice on certain things. But I feel like now, like maybe other female comics have that. I haven't experienced that, besides, being so fortunate to have you in my life. I haven't really had that kind of luxury to be able to do that. I mean, do you feel like maybe it's because of that you see more male comics thriving and making to the top 10 highest paid comedians in the world are all males and making it to Forbes versus female comics? Like, do you think that has anything to do with that?
Yeah, totally. Because it's like we don't have enough of us to have like that structure of like mentoring and community that the men have, and it's almost as if we're just lacking in numbers, and that's the real. It's not. It's that's where it's the disparity. The gender disparity really hurts us is the numbers. But
Yeah.
I think, that we need to create these dynasties where we have, this people that came before us, like Joan, and then we carry it on through these generations.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, I just, do you like, we're talking about this. I mean, do you feel like pain drives you? Like pain still continues to drive you to do bigger things and, keep going on? What kind of a role do you think pain plays in your life?
I think that it was like very important before, and that it's more that I'm motivated to create more of a peaceful life and also get some work satisfaction out of things that I make. So, pain is definitely motivating, I think, in creating art, and it's a way to sort of soothe whatever. I mean, humor ultimately is a coping mechanism. So the
Yep.
reason that we're funny about anything is because something hurt somewhere.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to use.
Yeah, absolutely. What projects are you working on? I'm looking at your awesome IMDb Pro page here. You got
Lots of different things. I mean, I'm mostly right now um, just like doing stand up, traveling a lot, doing a lot of different kinds of stuff with that. I've done some acting. I spent most of December doing a movie with Eliza Schlesinger, who's
love it.
a female comedian who's
Yep.
we had a really great time doing her movie, and she wrote it and produced it and stars in it, and so we did spend a lot of time doing that. And then now I am trying to do more acting stuff. I think that it's definitely opened up, I think opportunities for us, just as
Yeah.
other have opened up in entertainment.
Yeah.
And so, it's really trying to figure out what that next thing is going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Eliza's been on Minority Reports, which has been lovely, and I love seeing attractive, in addition to other kind of female stand-up comics, because this whole thing about like you can either be pretty or funny, you can't be both, and it just drives me fucking nuts when especially guys or male
Right.
comics talk like that. It just
Well, it's also like this, it speaks to a deep misogyny
yeah.
and distrust and hatred of women
Yep.
when we sort of look at, even you can feel it when in a beautiful, sort of traditionally beautiful woman takes the stage, there's an unease.
Yes.
And a kind of barrier that they have to get through. They have to get through all of this societal expectation about women's roles and our own deeply ingrained misogyny. It's very tough. Like, I think that women who are really beautiful have it tough
Yeah.
in this business. And it's really something that, to their credit, when they can rise above that and not give up due to just frustration, because it's a kind of subtlety, like, being a beautiful woman opens so many doors in your world,
Yeah.
except comedy's door. It's locked shut tight really hard.
That's right.
And it's really hard to open that. And it's a very, it speaks to our own society's deep hatred of women and women's beauty and female power.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, and the misogyny is not even just within men. Women also have this deep rooted, internalized misogyny also
Oh, yeah, yeah.
that they
Yep.
project on other women.
Yeah.
I got invited to come and perform last summer in New York at this 3,000 people event. It was all Pakistani people, right? And so these are like conservative Pakistani Muslim people, and I'm in New York. And the moment I get on stage and the moment they see this woman, like the men were all about cheering me on, which was, it just blew my mind. I was like, wait, what's going on? Because they were loving me. I was doing stage time. Literally, it was this huge stage. I got off the stage and I got into the people because I wanted to feel connected to them because I felt so disconnected to them. And the only people in the crowd who were trying to get me off stage and were trying to boo me off were women. And I was beyond shocked, and I was like, what the fuck is that? And I feel
Hmm.
like it speaks to exactly what you're talking about, which is that deep-rooted misogyny where you're working against your own good.
Oh, yeah, totally. Because we don't even know. Like, they don't even know that that's what they're doing. It's like that's the worst. I mean, that's like the cunning part of misogyny and women who participate in it is that they're not even aware of it.
Yeah.
And that's like the deep brainwashing that we have to kind of get rid of when we go and we start to try to really be feminists.
Yeah.
It's like you have to identify like what's happening within that prevents women going forward. Where am I stopping our journey? Where am I stopping our crusade? And
Yeah.
it's all within, which is really, it's hard to take
Yeah.
and hard to identify, but once you do, it's really important.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, when I was starting up stand-up comedy, I made sure I looked like I didn't have any makeup on. I looked like a total schlump when I got on stage. It was the baggiest clothes. I just didn't want to be remotely attractive because I felt that it was going to take away from my comedy, was going to take away from people like, hating me or guys just trying to come out to me. And I just wanted to do everything I could to make comedy my primary focus, which I feel like, thank God, now so much of it is involved where I'm just like, no, fuck it. If you're an attractive person and you look good, then fuck it. You look good and you go up
Yeah.
there and you be the best comic that you can. And one
Right.
has nothing. It should not be a deterrent. It should be an enhancement.
Yeah. It should be an enhancement. And it's also just like, I mean, it's more the comfort in how we feel in ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the most important thing. I think that now, as in my 50s, it's easier for me to kind of embrace that side just because, also in the 90s, it was like very like kind of looked down upon to be feminine. There was a kind of thing of like, you had to sort of like find your own definition of femininity, whether you were sort of going to follow that Kate Moss track or the Jenny Shimizu track or the Courtney Love track. And,
Yeah.
and so it was a kind of rejection of traditional sort of like ideas about beauty and stuff, but then they were sort of sidelined by eating disorders. So that was another
Mm.
sort of level of things you had to deal with. I mean, there was so many weird things about actually like being okay with being a woman and in comedy was just very, very tough. And so I think that now in my 50s, it's like I can finally just sort of embrace it and relax.
I love that. I feel like the older I get, the less fucks am I giving too, which is good.
Yeah,
But
it's good.
I don't think I'm nearly at the place that you are, and hopefully one day I would get there.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good place to be in. I mean, after sort of being sort of fraught by so many things, and now things are a lot easier.
Yeah,
I think.
I 100% agree. Can you? I mean, there's no pressure, of course, to talk about this, but you have a show coming out, Almost Asian, that you're working on.
Yeah, there's I'm working on a number of different shows for like other artists. So Almost Asian is a really fun, really hilarious project by Kate Malia. She's half Japanese and half white. It's like that Hapa experience, the multiracial experience, the
Love it.
biracial experience, which is so interesting and so cool to like get into in that kind of comedy, which is so awesome. So she's really great. So there's a few different projects that I'm working on there's Mercy Mistress, which is an Asian American story about a BDSM. Well, she's a dominatrix. She's an Asian American dominatrix, and she wrote memoirs that are now like a web series, but we want to make it into a series that is, some parts of it can be seen on Netflix's show Explained.
Mm-hmm.
So we do, they put a bunch of clips up there for Sex Explained, which is really great. So, just trying to promote Asian American projects, queer projects, things that are about BDSM, things that are about things that are like just different and really exciting. I love. So I'm doing lots of different kind of stuff like that.
I just absolutely love it. I was listening to you, and this thing went through my mind, and I've been thinking about this for a while. Even though Asian and South Asian cultures are so similar, I feel like when it comes to sexuality, or a woman, embracing her sexuality, talking about sexual stuff, or even as a female comic, like when you go up, when I go up and I talk about sexual stuff, I feel like Asian female comics have a lot more freedom to talk about sexual things or about their sexuality than somebody like me who comes from more like a Pakistani, like a Muslim background, where we're not allowed to even get on stage and talk, let alone talk about our sexuality, talk about our bodies. Like it's a really big deal for me to get up there and talk about how I'm developing a fupa, which is fat upper pussy area, if people don't know about. It's true. It's a real thing. I have to wear mom jeans now because my fupa just keeps getting out of control. And I just feel like, do you, I don't know, like what, do you have that kind of perception? Do you see that? Like, first of all, there's not a lot of us up there, like as far as the brown female comics go. But I don't really hear them. Like we're not almost allowed. We get called out. I get demeaned by fellow South Asian male comics if they hear me talking about my sexuality, which fucking blows my mind. It's as if they own my body or own me, which drives me nuts. But that, of course, is also that toxic patriarchy where that's ingrained in their system. So they're like, oh, if a woman gets up there and she talks about her sexuality, then she's a slut or she's a whore or whatever horrible label they want to put on it. I just feel like you can go up there and you can make this this hilarious jokes about fat pussy and all that, but when I do it, it's this instant like no, oh my God, you must be of loose care. You are a horrible woman that is going up there and doing that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that because so much of Asian American and Asian from Asia women are so much seen through the lens of sexuality, whether it's by white men or by white culture, forever. So that so much of us is defined by sexuality and the sort of fetishization that it lends itself to a kind of permission, oddly, to talk about sex that is sort of free from judgment in a way, because there's so much of it that's under scrutiny, that there's so much sexuality that kind of goes on with our persona, with our image, with our history, that it sort of lends itself to a kind of a comfort in sex in general that isn't there for, say, traditional like Korean roles, and traditional sort of like Asian roles in Asian families, in Asian culture. But it's the juxtaposition of the Asian Americanness, so Asian white relationships that sort of sexualized. And now it's really happening with men too, Asian American men in particular. So it's a kind of, it's a comfort with sexuality because so much of our identity is defined by sexuality, especially when we're talking about from the white male gaze.
Yeah.
Or the white gaze in general. So there's like, there's that, there's, I think that is, it's also that we're also kind of like mostly from Buddhist cultures, which sexuality is a little bit neutralized.
Yeah.
So that there's a sense of, a kind of there's no erotic charge or like thrill when people talk about sexuality, because there's like, it's like real neutralized because it's just kind of a function of reproduction, a function of so when you kind of look at, and also the diversity of like religious backgrounds in like East Asian cultures, there's a kind of neutrality when it comes to sexuality.
Yeah.
Just because there's so many different perspectives to consider.
Yeah.
And then so I think there's a lot of different reasons why culturally we have a little bit more of a sense of self-permission or there's decisive things that we're going to be sexual. We're going to talk about sexuality.
Yeah. And I love that, and I think for me, it's becoming more and more where I'm just like, fuck it. I'm going to talk about what's real to me, what pertains to my life. I mean, regardless of what, my brother straight out told me, he's like, the reason I don't come to your shows is because you talk about sexual stuff and I don't want to hear it. He straight up just told me that. And I'm just like, so do you not think that I'm a sexual being? Like, what do you think I am? Like an asexual person? Like, what do you think I am?
The craziness of like feeling like that is somehow he's got to own that part of another family member's existence. That's a weird thing. And I'm sure that it exists to many degrees in my family because, my family, there's a part of my family that's very Christian, very, very kind of like claiming of ownership of all the women. It's weird.
Yeah.
But that's just a strange thing. I mean, it's just where the patriarchy gets in their mind.
Yep.
And in their heart, and it's so weird. It's like, why do you think you can claim ownership over that?
That's right. I mean, like, just like you are my brother, I am his sister, but you're probably a sexual being and you have whatever things you do with a woman that you want to be with or a guy or whatever your thing is. And I do what I do. I mean, why do I have to, and it's this, I'm the first woman in my family ever from my mom or dad's side to pack up my bags and leave at 18. And that was a really big deal for my family because for the longest time, they blamed me for bringing quote unquote shame to the family. I brought shame to the family.
But I mean, it's like how and what, so what, like why? And then so?
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
first of all,
like, who cares?
Yeah. First of all, your honor of your family is not in my vagina. So let's get the honor out of my vagina.
It has nothing to do with I mean, and it's like, if it does, then that's not the right family to be in. Like, it's weird.
Right? It's just fucking, but it's so ingrained in people's minds and its cultures. And it's like, and if you talk about it, it's like, oh God, you are a person of loose character. So I envy Asian women. I do because they have this kind of flexibility. And I envy white chicks too because they get to talk about whatever they want, and for me it's like I almost have to walk on eggshells or just be careful, and I'm just trying to let go of that, and it's hard because it's so deep rooted in your reptilian brain,
right?
It's so deep rooted. Margaret, what a fantastic conversation we had. Thanks to you, this was just lovely, and you learned the light on so we can see more of your gorgeous face.
Thank you.
This was just wonderful. You're on Twitter and Instagram just under Margaret Cho.
It's on Twitter. It's at Margaret Cho. On Insta, it's Margaret_Cho.
Oh, awesome! Awesome.
And that's where I am.
Do you have any live shows coming up in LA?
I will be back at Largo, I think, on February 20th, so next month.
Awesome.
I usually do a monthly there, my residency there. And then, but I'm always around all over the place.
Margaret, thank you so very much for joining me. I just love and adore you. Thank you for being
love
you.
You. Thank you.
I love you. Thank you so much.
Love you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. That was such an incredible episode with the lovely and amazing Margaret Cho. Thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you guys soon.